when Priyanka Chopra said what she said, she has become a global icon. You know, she is someone who has the ability to pull stars to theaters. So I feel what really needs to happen is that your pay needs to be decided on on how much crowd you're truly pulling to the theaters, as opposed to what gender you are.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I think that's more important, because when we stop questioning and having these questions and conversations about pay parity based on man or woman, then the scenario will change. I think what's important is, are you creating good content? Is the audience excited to see your film? Whether you are a male actor or a female actor or a character actor, whoever, if you are attracting audiences, you should be paid, and there needs to be some sort of a proportional math to that, but not on the basis of gender. I had personally, from my journey, when I had that sort of break in Bombay. Now, when Yaar Yaar released, I was all of 2021, I was a kid. I had no idea about the industry. I got that film, I did that film. Before that, I think simultaneously I was shooting for my first film in Telugu, which happened to release a couple of months before that. It became a huge hit. And before I knew, I had some great films, working with great actors, makers, and I signed that on. Because my belief always was that you don't give up good work coming your way to find more work, and I also didn't see any harm. I was so naive. I thought, these guys have called me when I was in Bombay, so when they want me, they'll also call me. So that was the belief that I started with. Now, when I did come back here, and it was a very difficult choice to make at that point, because I was doing some of the biggest films, and then to tell to myself that you have to leave some sort of a stardom and fan following, and then move to Bombay and sort of start from scratch, because there's been a gap. Yeah, start afresh. But that was exciting for me. It was a fresh playground, and yes, there were a lot of people who were familiar with my body of work, but there were many who weren't. And yes, the media narrative sometimes does bother you, because in those 5 years, I'll be honest, in those 5 years, I possibly didn't have a break. I'm some 43 films. I've done some 43 films by now, and thank you. So to them, I couldn't say anything. How do you can't pull up everyone and tell them, hey, I wasn't sitting free, but this is how my journey was possibly
working
designed.
More than ever.
Yeah, and possibly it was designed, and I'm so grateful that it happened this way, because I had grown to know myself, my craft, learn about the industry, have more experience, and be prepared for Bombay, which is a much more competitive space. So by the time I came here, because during Yaar Yaar, I was really young and naive, and I didn't know anything. So all those 4-5 years, 6 years of work and experience that I had in the South Indian industries, that made me who I was. The discipline that I learned from there, the kind of work ethic that I picked up from there, it was amazing. So when I came in here, I was like, I just shut an ear to that conversation. I was like, people will see my work, and let the work speak for itself. So I think a lot of times it's not about just this conversation, but many a times there could be media narratives, and more, actually many times than reality, So there could be a media narrative, but sometimes you just choose to not answer and not get affected and let your work speak for yourself. And I think that's what I did at that point. And coming to the gender pay parity, disparity, this is a very difficult. There's no one answer to this, actually. Well, I think I'll add to. I'd like to say something about the change in aspiration. I mean, when obviously the streaming pattern has changed, and when I decided to be an actor, you obviously have the big love for cinema, and you want to see yourself on the big screen, and that's the dream that you live. But I also feel that with changing times, keeps changing the technology and the consumption patterns and the viewing patterns. I mean, there was black and white cinema, and then came colored cinema, and then now it's reached your homes, and there's the series pattern which is being consumed. So I think we also need to, yes, of course, you do feel that you want to be on the big screen, but I think both the formats have their own pros and cons, and reaches completely different sets of audiences. I think the beauty about the entire OTT streaming is that you can make long format shows, tell stories which you can't concise in 3 hours or 2 hours for a screen. And I think it just creates so much more opportunity for people to work, for directors, actors. So I think it's just a new space. It's not that one space is going to take away another, but it's just like a newfound love now, to be able to tell newer stories. Maybe, you know, this was for dance and song and singing and, you know, all the glamour, but if I want to do something hard hitting, I've got this. So I think both can beautifully coexist, and yeah, it's a newer aspiration.
No, absolutely.
And if I may, I just want to add one more thing. Homes, and there's, you know, the series pattern which is being consumed. So I think we also need to, yes, of course, you do feel that you want to be on the big screen, but I think both the formats have their own pros and cons and reaches completely different sets of audiences. I think the beauty about the entire OTT streaming is that you can make long format shows, tell stories which you can't concise in 3 hours or 2 hours for a screen. And I think it just creates so much more opportunity for people to work, for directors, actors. So I think it's just a new space. It's not that one space is going to take away another, but it's just like a newfound love now, to be able to tell newer stories. Maybe, you know, this was for dance and song and singing and, you know, all the glamour, but if I want to do something hard hitting, I've got this. So I think both can beautifully coexist, and yeah, it's a newer aspiration.
No, absolutely.
I'll take the second part of your question, because Rakul's beautifully articulated what OTT and what films can do. How can men be our allies? I think just listen. It's taken us a very, very, very long time to just enter through that door into the room. Listen to us. Allow us that space to just speak. I remember this one time, a colleague of mine could come, in my previous organization, couldn't come for a long time. And, all of us were sitting, and we asked her what happened, and she said, well, my child was unwell, and my in-laws had come. And the male colleagues who were sitting alongside started doing, and she goes again. Yes, she will. Because nobody has heard her for a very, very long time. Nobody has heard her stories. Listen to us. Just include us. Just be there for us. See us. That's important.
And if I may, I just want to add one more thing, because we are talking so much about women power and change and empowering women. I think, we've always, in the recent past, we've been talking a lot about feminism and saying, women should be feminists. But I think the real change, the true change will happen when we see men promoting feminism, when we have men as feminists who believe that men and women need to be given an equal space to work, grow, achieve, and flourish. So I think all the men out there, this is a request to you, that let the women push the women in your life to be feminists and be feminists yourself.